you hear me?
I can hear you okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Fantastic. So just let me do the old sound check, make sure that the folks on stream can hear you and hear me and that the volumes are okay. And as soon as I get the thumbs up from everybody, we will jump in. They say you are a little bit quiet, so I will turn you up on my end. Say hi for us, ZvZ.
Hey, can you guys hear me now?
Is that any better, folks on stream? I guess that'd probably be more prudent for me to look at Skype and have my mods just message me. Oh, they say perfect. I hear better, Strife. It's good now. Alright. Awesome, 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 ZtrifeCro. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. It is always so fun working with you guys over at EG. I've had so much fun doing this this show for the past 4 weeks, and now we're here. Here we are kicking off week 5 with Mr. EG.StrifeCro. So welcome.
Yep, thanks. And today we're going to go over ZvZ, right?
Yep, that is that's the plan for today, and for the rest of the week. Though of course you will not be coming on throughout the rest of the week, but In Control is going to come talk to us tomorrow, and then Sheth on Wednesday, and Machine on Thursday. So we're going to cover a lot.
Should be good.
A lot of ZvZ this this week. I want to kind of start things off by talking for just a brief second, actually, about ZvT, though.
Okay.
I had LZ Gamer come on a couple weeks ago, and I was really struggling against 2 racks and stuff. And I was doing the Mutalisk Baneling stuff that every Zerg player does these days. And LZ said, you know, actually, ZtrifeCro does this thing with infestors. And ever since, I don't think I've made a single muta in ZvT.
Well, I almost never just go straight infestor without mutas, but I feel like there's different ways you could play ZvT. You know, especially as you get to the mid-late game, I'm talking about, you know, we can just skip the whole early game, you know, versus T-Rex and things like that, but I feel like you should probably always, like, open muta, like, but how many mutas you make should be definitely based on what you want to achieve, because you shouldn't just kind of just keep making mutas, like, without any kind of goal. You kind of should make them in set amounts based on what you want to do, you know? You should pretty much start with maybe like 6 to 8 mutas, and what that does is, when you get around to 6 to 8, that's like kind of your first batch of mutas. It'll immediately force turrets, which is like step 1 of what you want to, you know, slow down their aggression and things like that. It will give you map control, and the most important thing is, as you start, you know, the most standard thing you're going mutas against is going to be like bio, you know, bio tank, medevac. That's the kind of the most standard thing, but without even a small squad of mutas, it's going to be extremely hard not to get just crushed by drops, you know, like multi-medevac drops, things like that. So kind of, I almost always feel like you should at least keep a small squad, like 6 to 8 mutas, just so you don't die to drops and force the turrets. But after that, you want to make more based on what you want to do. I think the standard ZvT thing, you know, all the Korean pros and the GSL games, like, the most standard thing right now is to get the muta ball, which is pretty much around, like, 25 mutas, things like that. And what that does is, you get that versus, you know, a tank, kind of like spread out tank lines, like 3 base Terran with tank, marine, medevac. And when you get 25 mutas, what that does is it makes them unable to defend with stack defense. So they pretty much can't defend with just turrets versus that. You can pretty much go around sniping turrets, and once you kill the turrets, you know, you can go for vulnerable positions. And that will basically force them to have to spread out their army to defend instead of just relying on stack defense. And because, you know, Mutiling Baneling is not a strong fighting army. I mean, it's not a terrible fighting army, but you never want to just go around, you know, fighting a big marine tank army, especially with sieged up already. And when you get around 25 mutas, you should pretty much force it to never fight their whole army at once, because they should have so many of their marines and maybe a couple Thors and things like that spread out across the map, so they can't, you know, keep their whole army in one blob and attack you, because they're going to just lose their entire base, things like that.
Right.
So. And Zerg is, for sure, the best base racing race. They shouldn't be just kind of trying to base race, you know, just attack with their whole army, leaving like 0 units behind, and you can just backstab them with, just mutas and lings and stuff like that. So.
Right.
About the Infestor thing, I guess I've been kind of playing another way, and I guess that might be what Jake was talking about, because when I said the standard thing was 25 mutas, I pretty much have been opening maybe like 6 to 8 mutas, but then instead of getting to that ball, I'm aiming for more of a late game hive tech pretty quick, and I would be getting Infestors after that, and double Evo chamber extremely early too with the attack and the armor upgrades, and pretty much what I'm going for versus Marine tank is pretty much Ultra Baneling. I feel like just Ultra Baneling is just extremely strong versus Marine tank, especially if you start early enough with the double Evo chamber upgrades, and you add in a couple of Infestors, just because I feel like you'll be able to kind of charge Marine tank lines or just fight them really easily with that army, as long as you make the Ultras go in first. A lot of people think Ultras are pretty much useless, and I think the reason they think that is because most of the times I see when people go Ultras, they just use it as a replacement for Banelings instead of a support for Banelings. Like, when they get Ultras, they'll just never make another Baneling for the rest of the game. And then a lot of Zergs will just think that's anti-tech, like they're winning the whole game. And then they get Ultras and just start losing just because, they switch to like a weaker unit composition, even though it's a higher tech.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's just that they're doing it so wrong, because you can't use Ultras as a replacement for AoE versus Marines. It's basically as a support for Banelings.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you get both together, especially if you have a couple Infestors, you can pretty much have extremely cost-effective, strong late-game armies versus Marine tank.
Well, that's all.
I wouldn't ever get Ultras versus pure bio, though. So
that's all cool stuff. The style we've kind of been using in our ZvT has actually been skipping the mutas altogether. Fast upgrades, fast hive, and just cracklings with Ultralisks and Infestors is really good. It's a powerful fighting army, unlike what what you see with mutilated.
The mutas.
And in a couple of weeks, I would love to bring you back on to talk about that style of ZvT more in depth. Because of course we are gonna jump right into some ZvZ here in just a second, but I did want to kind of start with that because you are the guy I kind of credit with opening up a lot of people's eyes to the effectiveness of Infestors in the mid-game Zerg army. Like we've always known that they're good, but a lot of people just don't build them. So I wanted to make sure that credit went to StrifeCro for that. But let's change gears.
Extremely good support.
Let's change gears and let's talk ZvZ. Recently, just a couple days ago, you played a ZvZ in a clan match against Cats on Steps of War. Might not have gone exactly how you hoped personally, but it was a great game. And the fact that you kind of went hatch first is something I want to talk about. We've done I don't know if you've kept up with our show at all. We've been bringing pros on weekly to kind of talk about different things. We've had Machine on, we've had Red on. And this is actually the first time that we're really expanding and bringing on some other Zergs to talk specifically about ZvZ. But in my opinion, there's sort of a standard that is becoming... Oh shit! What am I trying to say? There's a standard that is developing in the matchup, and in my opinion, that's Speedling Expand, where you get the fast ling speed, you get a couple lings out on the map, and then you expand right behind it. And you opted to go hatchery first, and I'm interested to know if that's your standard ZvZ opener, and if so, why?
ZvZ for me is just incredibly map dependent. I feel like ZvZ there's kind of two types of maps, and on one of the types of maps is basically maps like Steps of War, maybe Lost Temple, Shakuris, Metalopolis, and things like that. But basically those four maps. The reason why those four maps are so different and those maps are so productive, how to say it, like they're so beneficial to hatch first. It's because just those specific maps, like the other maps are more of like speedling openings, but the reason why on those maps hatch first is just so unexploitably strong, I feel, is because you can hatch first on those maps and verse 1 base, either verse 1 base aggression or 1 base all-in, things like that. You can pretty much just mass drone verse 1 base play, even if they're going all-in. and that's so different than the other maps when you hatch first versus 1 base speeding openings or whatever. It's because, on other maps, when you hatch first, you won't really get an economic advantage, no matter how hard how good you are. You might get a slight economic advantage if you play good, but pretty much you're not going to end up with more income. The main difference on those 4 maps is because you can hatch first, and you will end up with gigantic economic advantages if you play it right.
Okay.
The reasoning is because the main characteristics of the map that you're looking for that is the natural positioning and the ramp to your main.
Mm-hmm.
It's when the natural is like perfectly defending your main. When you can have queens and spine crawlers defend your natural and your main like with the same batch. Like on maps like Scrap Station, Zelnaga, things like Blistering. Basically every other map, the other ones. You can't defend your main and your natural with one set of spine crawlers and queens.
Yeah, totally agree.
Because some of them have backdoors and some of them are just they're way too far away. Like Zelnaga, the expo is just way too far away that you won't be able to defend your ramp. So hatch first on these maps. The reason why it's so strong is because I'm just not really getting a gas on these maps versus 1 base.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of just keep an overlord over their natural, and I won't start my aggression or start pressuring them until I see them at least expo. But pretty much I'll be using just queens and spine crawlers, and I might save up 6 larvae or 8 for the first 2 on my natural, so I'll have maybe 8 to 10 zerglings, and I'm just using the 8 to 10 zerglings early on to leverage up my spine crawlers, so I have control of my natural for a bit. And by the time that their gas upgrades kick in, like their speed and their banelings, whatever, things like that, I'll pretty much have my infrastructure up, like the spine crawlers and the 2 queens on the ramp.
Right.
And I'm not, even if they're going all in, the key thing is, if you feel like you're not safe enough, I'm just making more drones, and then just making more of those drones in the spine crawlers. I pretty much just stopped zergling production at that time. All my larvae is going into drones, and more drones into spine crawlers, at least until they counter expand themselves.
Yes. So let me ask you this: how many spine crawlers are you prepared to make? There has to be a point where it's detrimental to continue making spines.
Well, pretty much by the time that I would get, like 5 to 6, almost every game I would already have just this gigantic economic advantage. A lot of times when you're having